She watched him from across the darkened ballroom, this duke who kept his face turned away from the light. The rumors had reached even her small village, the war hero turned monster, the nobleman who received guests only in shadow, the man whose scars were so hideous that 3 potential brides had fled screaming. But Elena had come to Blackthorn Manor for one reason: to paint his portrait. And as she stepped forward into his presence, as he turned his face toward the sound of her footsteps, she saw something no one else had seen. Not the scars. Not the ruined flesh. But the truth that would either save them both, or destroy everything. What happens when the one person who can truly see is the one who refuses to look away? Let me tell you a story that begins in the autumn of 1817, in the aftermath of the Napoleonic Wars, when England was trying to heal from wounds both visible and invisible. This is a tale of beauty and horror, of perception and truth, of 2 broken souls who found each other in the darkness. This is the story of Alexander Hartwell, the Duke of Blackthorn, who lost his sight defending his country and gained scars that made society turn away in disgust. And this is the story of Elena Rosewood, a portrait artist whose unique gift allowed her to see what others could not, and whose courage would test everything she believed about love, sacrifice, and the nature of beauty itself. Gather close, for this is not a fairy tale, though it has elements of magic. This is not a tragedy, though it flirts with heartbreak. This is something more dangerous and more real, a story about the masks we wear, the scars we hide, and the rare souls brave enough to see beyond the surface into the truth beneath. Are you ready to enter Blackthorn Manor? To walk its shadowed halls and uncover its secrets? To witness what happens when an unstoppable artist meets an unmovable duke, and both discover that sometimes the only way to truly see is to close your eyes? Then let us begin. Elena Rosewood received the letter on a grey October morning that seemed to presage everything that would follow. The paper was expensive, heavy cream stock with a watermark visible when held to the light. The seal was black wax stamped with a crest she didn't recognize, a thorn wrapped around a tower. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the seal. In her 26 years, she'd never received correspondence from anyone above the merchant class. She was a portrait artist, yes, but her clientele consisted of minor gentry wanting to commemorate their daughters' debuts or aging merchants hoping to look more distinguished than they were. The letter's contents were brief and strange. Miss Elena Rosewood, your work has come to my attention. I require a portrait painter for a commission of unusual nature. The compensation will be £500, half upon your arrival at Blackthorn Manor, half upon completion of the work. You will reside at the manor for the duration of the commission, which I estimate at 6 weeks. You may bring one servant if you wish, though accommodations and assistance will be provided. I require your answer by week's end. A carriage will be sent for you on the 15th of October if you accept. His Grace, Alexander Hartwell, Duke of Blackthorn. Elena read it 3 times, her artist's mind catching the peculiarities. No flowery language of commission. No mention of what style of portrait was desired. No social pleasantries. Just stark facts and an amount of money that would change her life. £500. That was more than she'd earn in 5 years of ordinary commissions. It was enough to secure her aging mother's comfort, to move them from their cramped rooms above the milliner's shop to a proper cottage. It was enough to purchase better paints, better canvases, to perhaps, just perhaps, paint something for herself rather than endless portraits of self-important merchants. But there was something ominous about the letter too. The black seal. The phrase unusual nature. The requirement to live at the manor for 6 weeks. And most puzzling of all, why her? She was skilled, yes, but hardly famous. There were dozens of portrait artists in London with better credentials and higher profiles. You're not seriously considering this, her mother said when Elena showed her the letter. Margaret Rosewood's hands were twisted with arthritis, her face lined with years of worry. A young woman, alone in some remote manor with a duke. Elena, you know what that means. What he'll expect. He's offering £500, mother. No amount of money is worth your virtue. My virtue. Elena laughed, though there was no humor in it. Mother, I'm 26 and unmarried. Society considers me a spinster. And this duke, he's not summoning me for romance. He wants a portrait painter. But that night, Elena did what she always did when faced with a mystery. She researched. The lending library had old newspapers, and the name Blackthorne yielded results that made her blood run cold. Alexander Hartwell, the Duke of Blackthorne, had been a celebrated war hero. At 23, he'd led a cavalry charge at Waterloo that had turned the tide of a crucial battle. The newspapers from 1815 showed sketches of a handsome young man with strong features and commanding eyes, receiving commendations from Wellington himself. Then came 1816, the year everything changed. A military operation in France had gone catastrophically wrong. An explosion. Fire. Alexander Hartwell had saved 6 men from burning building before the second blast caught him directly. He'd survived, but barely. The reports were vague about his injuries, using euphemisms like grievous wounds and permanent disfigurement. He'd returned to England and immediately withdrawn from society. No public appearances. No social functions. He'd even declined an audience with the Prince Regent. And then the rumors started. Elena found them in gossip columns and society pages, growing more lurid with each retelling. The Duke was hideously scarred, they said. Half his face was melted away. He'd lost an eye, or both eyes, depending on who was telling the story. He received visitors only in darkness, sitting in shadow while conducting his business. 3 women had been brought to meet him as potential brides, and all 3 had fled in terror. One particularly vicious account claimed he was more monster than man now, that the explosion had not just scarred his flesh but twisted his mind, that servants who worked at Blackthorne Manor had to be paid triple wages to endure the sight of him. Elena sat in the library long after it should have closed, the articles spread before her, and felt something unexpected rising in her chest. Not fear, but anger. These writers didn't know him. They'd never seen him, never spoken to him. They'd created a monster from rumor and imagination, a Gothic villain to titillate readers over their morning tea. Alexander Hartwell had been a war hero who'd sacrificed everything for his country, and society had repaid him by turning him into a cautionary tale. She thought about his letter again. The stark, almost cold language. The excessive payment that suggested he knew no one would come cheaply. The requirement that she stay at the manor, probably because he knew an artist would need time to observe her subject, but also perhaps because he couldn't bear to make multiple appearances, even in his own home. Elena made her decision. She wrote her acceptance that very night. The carriage that arrived for Elena on October 15th was as black as the wax seal on the Duke's letter. The driver was a taciturn man who answered her attempts at conversation with grunts, and her maid, Lucy, a girl of 16 who'd begged to accompany her, whispered that the whole situation was dead creepy, miss. The journey took 2 days. They travelled north into the moorlands, where the landscape grew increasingly desolate. Rolling hills gave way to rocky outcrops and twisted trees that seemed to claw at the grey sky. On the afternoon of the second day, they crested a hill and Lucy gasped. Blackthorne Manor rose from the moor like something from a Gothic novel. It wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense, it was too stark, too severe for that. Built of dark stone that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light, it had towers at each corner and narrow windows that looked like watchful eyes. Thorn bushes grew wild around its foundations, and a murder of crows circled its highest tower. "Miss, I don't like this," Lucy whispered. "It looks haunted." Elena couldn't disagree, but she kept her voice steady. "It's just a house, Lucy. Stone and mortar, nothing more." But as they approached, She felt the weight of the place settle over her like a shroud. This wasn't just a house. This was a fortress, a prison, a place designed to keep the world out and its master hidden within. The carriage stopped before massive oak doors banded with iron. Before Elena could knock, they swung open to reveal a woman who perfectly matched the house, severe, dark, and imposing. "Miss Rosewood. I am Mrs. Thorne, the housekeeper. His Grace is expecting you." Her voice was clipped, professional, but not unkind. "Your maid will be shown to the servants' quarters. You will be given the Rose Room in the East Wing." "When will I meet the Duke?" Elena asked, stepping into an entrance hall that was surprisingly warm despite its Gothic exterior. Fires burned in two massive fireplaces, and though the decor was dark, it was also rich. Tapestries on the walls, thick carpets on the floors. "His Grace receives visitors in the evening, after sunset. He will send for you when he's ready." Mrs. Thorne's expression was carefully neutral. "I should warn you, Miss Rosewood, His Grace has particular requirements. He meets guests in his study, which is kept very dim. You must not attempt to light additional candles or open the curtains. You must not react with shock or surprise to anything you see. And you must not, under any circumstances, attempt to touch him without permission." The warnings sent a chill down Elena's spine, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand. I wonder if you do." Mrs. Thorne's eyes were sharp. "3 young ladies came before you, all with marriage in mind. None lasted more than 5 minutes in his presence. I don't know what you've heard about the Duke, but I assure you, the reality is worse than any rumor." "Then perhaps," Elena said quietly, "the reality also deserves more compassion than it's received." Something flickered in Mrs. Thorne's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. "Your room, Miss Rosewood. Dinner will be sent up at 7. His Grace will send for you at 9 o'clock precisely. I suggest you rest. You'll need your composure." The Rose Room was beautiful, a 4-poster bed with rose-colored hangings, a writing desk positioned near tall windows overlooking the moor, and most importantly for Elena, excellent natural light for painting. Her trunks had already been brought up, and Lucy was busily unpacking. "Miss, are you sure about this?" the girl asked, her hands trembling as she hung Elena's dresses. "Mrs. Thorne told the other servants that the Duke is dreadful to look upon. That his face is." "Lucy, I didn't come here to judge the Duke's appearance. I came here to paint his portrait." Elena moved to the window, looking out over the darkening moor. "Whatever scars he bears, he earned them in service to England. That deserves respect, not horror." But as the hours crept toward 9 o'clock, Elena felt her composure beginning to crack. She'd been so confident in the lending library, so certain she could face whatever she found. But now, in this Gothic manor, with the wind howling outside and shadows gathering in corners, she felt the first stirrings of fear. What if the rumors were true? What if he was so disfigured that even her artist's objectivity couldn't withstand the shock? What if she failed, fled like those other women, and had to return to London in shame? At precisely 9 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. A footman stood in the corridor, his face carefully blank. "Miss Rosewood. His Grace will see you now." Elena followed him through a maze of corridors, each darker than the last. The footman carried a single candle, and their footsteps echoed on the stone floors. Finally, they stopped before a heavy wooden door. "His Grace is within. Enter when you're ready, miss. And remember, no sudden movements, no screaming, no running. He's had quite enough of that." The footman left her there in the near darkness, and Elena stood before the door feeling her heart hammer against her ribs. This was it. The moment that would define everything that followed. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and pushed open the door. The study was exactly as Mrs. Thorne had warned, so dark Elena could barely make out the shapes of furniture. A fire burned low in the hearth, providing just enough light to see by. Heavy curtains blocked any moonlight from entering. It took her eyes several moments to adjust. "Miss Rosewood. Welcome to Blackthorn Manor." The voice came from a wing-backed chair positioned with its back to the fireplace, ensuring whoever sat in it remained in deepest shadow. The voice itself was beautiful, deep, cultured, with the crisp enunciation of the aristocracy. But there was something else in it too. Weariness. Resignation. The sound of a man who'd long ago stopped hoping for anything good. "Your Grace." Elena curtsied to the darkness, feeling absurd. "Thank you for inviting me." "Inviting? Is that what you call it? I assumed you came for the money, Miss Rosewood. £500 is enough to make anyone overlook certain unpleasantness." There was bitterness in his tone, and Elena felt her spine stiffen. "I came because I'm a portrait artist, and you've commissioned a portrait. The money is welcome, yes, but I don't consider my craft unpleasant, regardless of the subject." A pause. Then something that might have been a laugh. "You have spirit." The others didn't. They came in trembling, took one look, and ran. "I assumed you'd do the same." "I haven't seen you yet, Your Grace. You're sitting in shadow. And there I'll remain. I'm told you're an exceptional artist, Miss Rosewood. Surely you can paint a portrait without requiring your subject to pose in full light like some tavern wench sitting for a miniature." The insult stung, but Elena recognized it for what it was, a test. He was trying to drive her away before she could hurt him by leaving on her own. It was a defense mechanism, and a clumsy one at that. "I'm told you're an exceptional duke, Your Grace. Surely you can treat your commissioned artist with basic courtesy." Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, the bitterness was gone, replaced by genuine curiosity. "You're not afraid of me?" "Should I be? Have you done something to warrant fear beyond sitting in an uncomfortable chair in unnecessary darkness?" "You haven't seen my face." "True. But I've seen your letter, clear, direct, fair in its terms. I've seen your home, well-maintained, warm despite its Gothic exterior, with servants who seem loyal rather than terrified. I've seen evidence of your character, Your Grace. A face is just flesh and bone. Character is what matters." How remarkably naive. But there was less edge to his voice now. "Very well, Miss Rosewood. You want to see me. To get the horror over with so we can proceed." "I want to see my subject so I can begin planning the portrait, yes." Elena heard movement, the whisper of fabric, the creak of the chair. A figure rose from the shadows, tall and broad-shouldered. He moved toward the fireplace, and as the low flames illuminated him, Elena got her first true look at the Duke of Blackthorn. And gasped. Not in horror. In recognition. The Duke froze at her gasp, and Elena could see his jaw clench, the one part of his face that was unmarred. He turned as if to retreat back to his chair, back to the shadows. "Don't," Elena said sharply. "Don't you dare hide from me now." You gasped. They all gasp. Then comes the screaming, the running. I gasped because you've been sitting in the dark like some Gothic villain when there's absolutely no need for it. Elena moved closer to the fireplace, her artist's eye taking in every detail. Your Grace, may I light more candles? I need proper light to see you. Are you mad? Have you not looked at me? I've looked. Now let me see. Before he could protest, Elena was lighting the branch of candles on the mantelpiece, then the sconces on the walls. Light flooded the study, and the Duke stood frozen in it like a stag caught by hunters. Elena studied him with professional detachment, cataloguing what she saw. The scars were extensive, yes, The entire left side of Alexander Hartwell's face was a landscape of healed burns, reddened, puckered skin that pulled at the corner of his eye and mouth. His left ear was partially melted away. The scarring continued down his neck and disappeared beneath his cravat, suggesting it covered much of his body. But that was only half his face. The right side was untouched. Strong jaw, high cheekbone, the kind of aristocratic features that would have made him devastatingly handsome. His hair was dark, though prematurely threaded with grey at the temples. And his eyes. "You're blind," Elena said suddenly. "Completely blind. Both eyes." Alexander's head snapped toward her voice. "How did you know? I can still turn toward sounds. Most people don't realize. Your eyes don't track movement. They're beautiful, grey as storm clouds, but they don't focus. And there's scarring around both of them." Elena moved closer, her artist's training overriding all sense of propriety. The explosion damaged the optic nerves. The surgeon said the trauma was too severe. The blindness is permanent. His voice was flat, reciting facts. "So you see, Miss Rosewood, you've been summoned to paint a portrait of a blind man who looks like a monster. Rather ironic, don't you think? I can't see myself, but I can feel their revulsion. I can hear it in the way their breathing changes, in the way they back away. Is that why you keep the lights low? Not to hide from others, but because you can't see their reactions anyway, so why illuminate yourself?" Alexander was silent for a long moment. No one has ever understood that before. Elena circled him slowly, her mind already composing the portrait. The women who fled, they were fools. They saw scars and assumed they defined you. But they're just scars, Your Grace. Evidence of survival, of sacrifice. They don't make you monstrous. They make you human. Easy for you to say when you don't have to live in this body. You're right. But I do have to look at bodies constantly, studying them, painting them. And I can tell you that scars are infinitely more interesting than unblemished perfection. She stopped directly in front of him. "May I touch you? I need to understand the structure of your face to paint it properly." "You want to touch?" Alexander's voice cracked. "Why?" "Because I'm a portrait artist, and portraiture is about more than just surface appearance. It's about understanding the person beneath." Elena raised her hand slowly, giving him time to refuse. "May I?" Yes. Yes, if you must." Elena's fingers touched his right cheek first, the unmarred side. She felt him flinch, and realized with a start that he probably hadn't been touched with gentleness since before the explosion. Her heart ached, but she kept her touch professional, clinical. "Strong bone structure," she murmured, tracing his cheekbone. "Good proportions. Your right side would photograph beautifully in the new daguerreotype style. And the left?" His voice was barely a whisper. Elena moved her fingers to the scarred side, and this time he didn't flinch. She traced the damaged tissue gently, noting how it pulled his lip into a permanent half-smile, how it narrowed his eye slightly. "Equally interesting. The texture is complex. The artist in me sees shadows and depths here that smooth skin could never provide. You think these scars make you a monster, but they make you extraordinary. They tell a story that your unmarred face never could." "What story?" Alexander's voice was rough with emotion. "Sacrifice. Courage. Survival against terrible odds." Elena's fingers moved to his temple, where grey threaded through dark hair. "You went into fire to save others. These scars are proof of that choice. They're honorable, Your Grace. Not shameful. The women who ran didn't see honor. Then they weren't worthy of you." Elena stepped back, her assessment complete. "I can paint your portrait, Your Grace. And I promise you, it will be honest. Not cruel, not pitying, but truthful. Is that acceptable? Alexander turned his face toward her voice, and Elena saw something raw and vulnerable in his blind eyes. Why are you being kind to me? I'm not being kind. I'm being professional. Kindness would be lying to you, pretending the scars don't exist. I'm simply seeing you as you are, scars and all, and finding the truth in it. And the truth is? Elena smiled, though she knew he couldn't see it. That you're going to be one of the most challenging and rewarding subjects I've ever painted. Now, shall we discuss the composition? I'm thinking 3/4 profile, with lighting from the right to create dramatic shadows. Miss Rosewood. Alexander's hand shot out, caught her wrist with surprising accuracy. His grip was gentle but insistent. I need to know, are you truly not repulsed? Or are you simply a better actress than the others? Elena looked down at his hand on her wrist. She could feel his pulse racing, could sense the vulnerability in his question. This was a man who'd been rejected so many times that he couldn't believe in acceptance anymore. I'm going to tell you something my father taught me before he died, Elena said quietly. He was a painter too, and he used to say that every face tells a story, but only the interesting faces tell stories worth hearing. Your Grace, your face tells the story of a man who stood between others and certain death. Who sacrificed his sight, his comfort, his place in society to save lives. That's not repulsive. That's heroic. I don't feel heroic. I feel like a monster hiding in darkness. Then perhaps it's time to step into the light. Elena gently extracted her wrist from his grip. I'll need you to sit for me daily, in proper lighting. No more shadows, no more darkness. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Then you'll never know what you truly look like, and you'll spend the rest of your life hiding from yourself. Elena's voice was firm. Is that what you want, Your Grace? To live in darkness forever? Alexander was silent for so long that Elena wondered if she'd pushed too far. Then, quietly, almost inaudibly, No, I don't want that. Then we begin tomorrow. 9 o'clock, but in the morning this time. In the south drawing room, Mrs. Thorne mentioned it has excellent natural light. Wear something comfortable. And Your Grace? Yes. Thank you for trusting me. As Elena left the study, she heard him whisper behind her, Thank you for seeing me. The next morning, Elena arrived at the south drawing room to find it already prepared. Someone, probably Mrs. Thorne, had positioned a chair near the windows, where autumn sunlight streamed in golden and clear. Her easel had been set up, her paints arranged precisely as she preferred them. Alexander arrived precisely at 9, led by his valet, a kind-faced man named Thomas who positioned the Duke in the chair and then retreated to a discreet distance. The Duke wore a deep blue coat that brought out the grey of his eyes, and his hair had been carefully dressed. He looked like what he was, a powerful nobleman, except for the way his hands gripped the arms of the chair, white-knuckled with tension. Good morning, Your Grace, Elena said cheerfully, positioning herself at her easel. You look very fine today. I'll have to take your word for that, as I can't see myself. But there was less bitterness in his voice than yesterday. How shall we proceed? First, I need you to relax. You're sitting like you're facing a firing squad. That's rather how I feel. Elena smiled. I promise, I'm armed only with brushes. Now, turn your head slightly to the right. Yes, like that. And let your shoulders drop. You're not in the military anymore, Your Grace. You don't need to sit at attention. As she began the preliminary sketches, she kept up a steady stream of conversation, partly to help him relax and partly because she was genuinely curious. Tell me about the men you saved. In the explosion. Alexander's hands loosened slightly on the chair arms. How did you know there were multiple men? The reports said 6. But they didn't say who they were or what became of them. They were my men. Cavalry soldiers under my command. We'd been sent to investigate a warehouse suspected of storing weapons for Napoleon's remaining loyalists. It was a trap. The entire building was rigged to explode. His voice grew distant, remembering. I got 5 men out before the first blast. Then I heard screaming from inside. Private William Fletcher, just 19 years old, trapped under fallen beams. I went back for him. And the second explosion caught you both. It should have killed us both. Instead, it just did this. He gestured vaguely at his face. Fletcher survived. Lost his leg, but survived. He writes to me sometimes. Has a wife now, a baby daughter. He named her Alexandra, after me. Elena's hand paused in its sketching. And the others? The other 5? All survived. All still alive as far as I know. 3 of them have visited me here. His voice softened. They don't see a monster. They see the man who saved their lives. They're the only ones who don't treat me like I'm made of glass or horror. What about your family? Alexander's jaw tightened. My mother visits once a year, stays for exactly 3 days, and spends most of it weeping about how her handsome son is gone. My father died before Waterloo. I have 2 sisters, both married, both convinced I should stay hidden at Blackthorn Manor for the rest of my life so I don't embarrass them socially. I'm sorry. Don't be. I prefer solitude to pity. He paused. Most of the time. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Elena sketching the basic structure of his face while Alexander sat with surprising patience. The morning light was perfect, casting shadows that emphasized the planes of his face, both the scarred and unmarred sides. Why did you become a portrait artist? Alexander asked suddenly. My father was a painter. Not portraits, though. He painted landscapes, scenes from mythology, that sort of thing. Beautiful but impractical. We were always poor. Elena mixed paint on her palette, testing colors. When he died, my mother and I needed income. Portrait painting was something I could do that people would pay for. And I discovered I was good at it. Just good. Elena smiled. Exceptional, if I'm being honest. I have a gift for seeing people as they truly are, not as they wish to be seen. It makes my portraits uncomfortable sometimes, but accurate. Is that why you're not married? Men don't like being seen too clearly. That, and I'm too old, too poor, and too opinionated. Elena began applying paint to canvas. I had a suitor once, a nice merchant who wanted a decorative wife to hang on his arm like one of my portraits. When he realized I had thoughts and ambitions beyond his comfort, he withdrew his offer. I wasn't heartbroken. Didn't you want marriage? Children? I wanted freedom to paint what I chose, when I chose. Marriage would have ended that. She studied him thoughtfully. What about you? You mentioned 3 potential brides. Arranged by my mother. Each one a beautiful, accomplished young lady from an excellent family. Each one took one look at me and fled. I can't blame them. What woman would choose this? He gestured at his scarred face. A woman with sense and depth, obviously. But such women are rare, I'll grant you. Elena worked in silence for a moment, then added quietly, I don't find you repulsive, Your Grace. I hope you know that. You're either lying or unique. I'm unique. I'm also truthful. Your scars don't repel me. If anything, they make you more interesting to paint. Interesting. Is that what we're calling it? Would you prefer handsome? Because the right side of your face certainly qualifies. Elena's tone was matter-of-fact. And the left side has character. Together, they make you memorable. Distinctive. Those vapid brides were fools. Alexander laughed, a genuine laugh that transformed his face. You have a remarkably strange way of giving compliments, Miss Rosewood. I'm an artist. We see things differently. As the days passed, their sessions developed a rhythm. Every morning at 9, Alexander would arrive at the south drawing room. Elena would paint, and they would talk about everything and nothing. Books, politics, art, philosophy, memories of the war, dreams for the future. Elena learned that Alexander was brilliant, well-read, thoughtful, with opinions that challenged her own. He learned that she was fierce in her convictions, passionate about her art, and possessed of a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, something shifted between them. It started with small things. The way Alexander's face turned toward the sound of Elena's footsteps, anticipating her arrival. The way Elena found herself thinking about him during the evenings, wondering what he was doing, whether he was lonely in the darkness. By the third week, their conversations had grown more personal, more intimate. Why do you paint only in natural light? Alexander asked one morning. Because artificial light lies. Candles and lamps cast deceptive shadows, hide flaws, create beauty where there might be none. Natural light is honest. Cruel sometimes, but honest. Elena paused in her work. Rather like me, I suppose. You're not cruel. I'm honest, which people often mistake for cruelty. I don't. I find it refreshing. Alexander shifted slightly in his chair. The portrait, how does it look? Elena hesitated. She'd been working on it for 3 weeks now, and it was unlike anything she'd ever painted. She'd captured him 3/4 profile, the scarred side toward the viewer but not emphasized. The lighting was dramatic, showing both the damage and the strength. His blind eyes looked not vacant but thoughtful, seeing inward rather than outward. It was powerful, honest, and far more intimate than any portrait should be. It's truthful, she said finally. That's evasive, Miss Rosewood. Unlike you. It's the best work I've ever done, Elena admitted. But it's also revealing in ways that might make you uncomfortable. Revealing how? It shows you as I see you. Not as a monster, not as a pitiful victim, but as a man who survived terrible trauma and retained his humanity. It shows your strength, your intelligence, She stopped, realizing she was about to say something dangerous. My what? Your worth, Elena finished, though that wasn't what she'd been about to say. Alexander was quiet for a long moment. Then, may I touch it? The painting. It's not finished. I know. But I want to understand. Elena led him to the easel, guided his hands to the canvas. She watched as his fingers traced the raised texture of the paint, following the contours of his own face. You've painted the scars, he said softly. Of course. They're part of you. But you haven't made them the focus. No. You're the focus. The scars are just part of your story. Alexander's fingers lingered on the canvas. I wish I could see it. See myself through your eyes. I can describe it, if you'd like. Please. Elena stood beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. You're turned slightly away from the viewer, as if you've just noticed something in the distance. Your expression is thoughtful, not guarded. The light comes from the right, highlighting the unmarred side of your face but not hiding the left. The scars are visible, but they're painted with the same care and attention as the rest of you, neither emphasized nor minimized. And my eyes. Your eyes are extraordinary. They're looking at something the viewer can't see, something internal. They make you look wise rather than damaged, thoughtful rather than blind. You see all that. I paint what I see, Your Grace. Alexander turned toward her, and suddenly they were very close, close enough that Elena could see the fine scars around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. What else do you see, Elena? It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sent a shiver through her. I see a man who's hidden himself away for too long. A man who's let fear and shame cage him more effectively than any injury could. A man who's forgotten that he's still alive, still vital, still. Still what? Elena's breath caught. She was standing too close, feeling too much. This was dangerous territory. She was here as an employee, an artist, not as a woman falling for her subject. But oh, she was falling. Still capable of being loved, she whispered. Alexander's hand came up, found her face with surprising accuracy. His thumb traced her cheekbone, and Elena felt her eyes close. Elena, I. A sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. Mrs. Thorne entered, her expression carefully neutral but her eyes knowing. Pardon the interruption, Your Grace, Miss Rosewood. But you have a visitor, Your Grace. Lady Caroline has arrived from London. She's waiting in the main drawing room. Alexander's hand dropped from Elena's face. His expression shuttered. My sister. Of course. Tell her I'll receive her shortly. As Mrs. Thorne left, Alexander turned back to Elena. I should go. We can resume tomorrow. Of course, Your Grace. Elena's voice was steadier than she felt. But as he left, guided by Thomas, Elena stood staring at the portrait and realized the terrible truth. She'd fallen in love with the Duke of Blackthorn. And it was going to destroy her. Elena didn't see Alexander for the rest of that day or the next. His sister's visit, Mrs. Thorne explained, required his attention. But on the third day, a summons came, not from the Duke, but from Lady Caroline herself. Elena found her in the morning room, a woman of perhaps 35 with Alexander's dark hair and sharp features, though without his scars or his depth. She was examining a piece of embroidery with a critical eye when Elena entered. Miss Rosewood. How good of you to come. Lady Caroline's smile didn't reach her eyes. Please, sit. We need to have a conversation. Elena sat, her spine straight, her expression composed. How may I help you, my lady? By understanding your place. Lady Caroline set down the embroidery. I've spoken to Mrs. Thorne. She tells me you and my brother have been spending every morning together, alone, for 3 weeks. That your conversations have grown quite intimate. We're artist and subject, my lady. Conversation is natural. Is touching also natural? Mrs. Thorne says she interrupted a rather compromising moment the other day. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. Your brother was examining the portrait. My brother is blind, Miss Rosewood. He can't see you batting your eyelashes at him or positioning yourself provocatively. But I can. And I know exactly what you're doing. And what am I doing, my lady? Entrapping him. You're a poor artist with no prospects, and you've stumbled into proximity with a wealthy duke. A scarred, blind duke who's vulnerable to the first woman who shows him kindness. It's quite clever, really. Pretend you're not repulsed by his appearance, make him feel seen and understood, and before he knows it, you've maneuvered him into a proposal. Elena's hands clenched in her lap, but she kept her voice level. I have done no such thing. Haven't you? Then why were his hands on your face? Why were you standing so close? Mrs. Thorne said you were practically in his arms. The portrait. The portrait is an excuse, and we both know it. Lady Caroline leaned forward. Let me be very clear, Miss Rosewood. My brother is the Duke of Blackthorn. His marriage, when it happens, will be to someone of appropriate rank and breeding. Not to some impoverished artist who paints for money. I have no designs on your brother. Then why haven't you finished the portrait? 3 weeks is more than sufficient for a competent artist. Unless you're deliberately dragging it out to spend more time with him. The accusation stung because there was truth in it. Elena could have finished the portrait faster. But she'd found herself adding details that weren't strictly necessary, refining sections that were already complete, anything to justify another day, another session, another morning of conversation and connection. I'm ensuring the portrait is perfect, Elena said stiffly. How noble. Well, let me ensure something else is perfect, your understanding of the situation. Lady Caroline stood, looking down at Elena with cold disdain. Finish the portrait within the week. Take your payment and leave. And if you have any contact with my brother after you depart, I will ensure your reputation is destroyed. No one will hire you to paint so much as a fruit bowl. Do I make myself clear? Perfectly clear, my lady. Good. Now get out of my sight. Elena fled to her room, her hands shaking with rage and humiliation. Lucy found her there an hour later, pacing like a caged animal. Miss, what's wrong? Everything. Nothing. I don't know. Elena pressed her hands to her face. Lucy, I've been so foolish. What happened? Elena told her everything. The growing closeness with Alexander, the almost kiss, Lady Caroline's accusations and threats. But miss, you haven't done anything wrong, Lucy protested. You've been kind to the Duke, that's all. I've been more than kind. Elena couldn't finish the sentence. It doesn't matter. Lady Caroline is right about one thing, I'm a poor artist, and he's a duke. There's no future in this. I need to finish the portrait and leave. But you love him. Elena looked at her young maid in shock. I never said. You didn't have to. I've seen the way you smile when you come back from the sessions. The way you talk about him. Miss, you're in love with the Duke. It doesn't matter what I feel. He's a duke, and I'm nobody. The Duke doesn't seem to think you're nobody. The Duke is blind and lonely, and I'm the first person who's treated him with kindness in years. He's grateful, not in love. But even as Elena said it, she wondered if it was true. Elena spent the next 3 days finishing the portrait with fierce determination. She painted from memory, not calling for Alexander to sit, telling Mrs. Thorne she needed to work alone to complete it properly. The truth was, she couldn't face him. Not with Lady Caroline's accusations ringing in her ears. Not with her own feelings tangled and confused. Better to finish the work, take the money, and leave before she did something irreparably foolish. On the 7th day, she declared the portrait complete. Mrs. Thorne sent word to the Duke, and that evening, Elena was summoned to the study, the same darkened room where they'd first met. Only this time, Alexander had requested lights. The room blazed with candles, and he stood by the fireplace, his face no longer hidden in shadow. You've been avoiding me, he said without preamble. I've been working on the portrait, Your Grace. Don't call me that. Not after. He stopped. Is it finished? Yes. And you plan to leave tomorrow? I plan to leave as soon as you've accepted the work and paid me, yes. I see. His voice was carefully neutral. May I, that is, will you describe it to me one final time? Elena looked at the canvas she'd brought with her, propped on an easel. In the candlelight, it seemed to glow. She'd captured something ineffable, not just Alexander's appearance, but his essence. The strength beneath the scars. The keen intelligence in his blind eyes. The quiet dignity of a man who'd suffered and survived. It was the best work she'd ever done. And it revealed far too much about how she felt about its subject. It's a 3/4 profile, she began, her voice unsteady. You're turned slightly to the right, your expression thoughtful. The lighting emphasizes the structure of your face both sides equally. Your scars are visible but not the focus. The focus is your eyes, and the strength in your bearing. And how do I look? Honestly. You look like a duke who's forgotten his own worth, but who still possesses it nonetheless. You look like a man worth knowing. Worth, she stopped, unable to continue. Worth loving. Alexander asked softly. Elena's breath caught. Your Grace. My sister spoke to you. I know. She came to me afterward, quite proud of herself for protecting me from a fortune hunter. His smile was bitter. As if anyone would want a blind, scarred duke for anything other than his money. That's not true. Isn't it? Elena, I'm not a fool. I know what I am. I know what I look like. I know that any woman who shows me kindness is either extraordinarily compassionate or extraordinarily calculating. And which am I? I don't know anymore. Alexander moved closer, and Elena could see the pain in his face. At first, I thought you were just being professional. Then I thought perhaps you were kind. But this past week, when you've avoided me, I've had time to wonder if my sister was right. If you were just what? Pretending. Using you. Elena's voice rose with anger and hurt. Your Grace, I have avoided you because your sister made it very clear that my presence here is inappropriate. That I'm overstepping my station by presuming to conversation with you, let alone. Let alone what? Let alone feeling what I feel. The words burst out before Elena could stop them. Let alone falling in love with you, which is precisely what I've done, and precisely what can never matter because I'm a poor artist and you're a duke and the world doesn't allow for such things. The silence that followed was deafening. You love me. Alexander's voice was barely a whisper. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. It doesn't matter. It's the only thing that matters. Suddenly he was moving, closing the distance between them with surprising speed for a blind man. His hands found her shoulders, her face. Elena, I've been falling in love with you since that first night when you refused to be horrified by me. Every morning I wake up counting the hours until our session. Every evening I go to sleep remembering your voice, your laugh, the way you see me not as a monster but as a man. Alexander. My sister is wrong about you. She's wrong about what's possible. She's wrong about everything except one thing. You're not of my social class. And I don't care. I don't care about society's rules or expectations. I care about you. You barely know me. I know that you're brave enough to enter a Gothic manor to paint a rumored monster. I know that you're talented enough to see beauty where others see horror. I know that you make me laugh, make me think, make me feel alive for the first time since the explosion. His hands cupped her face gently. I know that I love you, Elena Rosewood. And I know that I want you to stay, not as my portrait painter, but as my wife. Elena's world tilted. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more. Marry me, Elena. Be my duchess. Help me step into the light you've shown me. Please. The scandal. Let society talk. I've been their monster for 2 years. If they want to add married beneath him to my list of transgressions, so be it. Your family. My sister will adjust. My mother will eventually accept it. And if they don't, then they don't. You're what matters. This, he gestured between them, is what matters. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. I'm terrified. So am I. But I'm more terrified of letting you walk away. Alexander's thumb brushed away her tears. Say yes, Elena. Please. Take a chance on a blind, scarred duke who loves you more than he's ever loved anything. Elena looked at this man who'd been called a monster, who'd hidden in darkness, who'd lost everything and somehow still had the courage to love. She thought about Lady Caroline's threats, about society's judgment, about all the practical reasons this was impossible. And then she thought about the alternative, a life without him, painting portraits of strangers, never again feeling this connection, this rightness. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Alexander's smile was radiant. He pulled her close and kissed her, their first kiss, tender and desperate and perfect. When they finally broke apart, Elena laughed through her tears. "Your sister is going to murder me." "Let her try. I'm a war hero. I can protect you." "You're blind." "I have excellent hearing. I'll hear her coming." They stood together in the candlelit study, holding each other, and for the first time since the explosion, Alexander Hartwell felt whole. The next morning brought a storm, both literal and metaphorical. Rain lashed against Blackthorn Manor's windows while inside, Lady Caroline's fury was equally tempestuous. "You cannot marry this woman," she shrieked at her brother. "Think of the scandal. Think of the family name." "I have thought of it," Alexander replied calmly. "And I've decided I care more about my happiness than society's opinion." Elena stood beside him in the morning room, her hand in his, facing Lady Caroline's wrath. She'd expected anger, but the visceral hatred in the woman's eyes was shocking. "You've bewitched him," Lady Caroline hissed at Elena. "Used his blindness and loneliness against him. Well, it won't work. I'll have this engagement broken if it's the last thing I do." "On what grounds?" Alexander asked. "Elena and I are both of age, both unmarried, both willing. You have no legal recourse." "Perhaps not legal, but I have social recourse." Lady Caroline's smile was cruel. "Tell me, Miss Rosewood, are you prepared for what will happen when society learns of this match? You think you've experienced cruelty now? Wait until every drawing room in London is dissecting your character, your motives, your very appearance. They'll call you a fortune hunter, a manipulator, a woman who preyed on a damaged man. Your mother will be ostracized. No respectable person will speak to you. Is that truly what you want?" Elena felt her courage waver, but Alexander's grip on her hand tightened. "What I want," Elena said, finding her voice, "is to marry the man I love. If society chooses to judge me for that, so be it." "How brave. How noble." Lady Caroline's tone dripped sarcasm. "But nobility doesn't survive social annihilation, Miss Rosewood. And make no mistake, that's what this will be. I will ensure every door in England is closed to you." "Every door but mine," Alexander said firmly. "And that's the only door that matters." Lady Caroline's expression shifted, and Elena saw calculation replace rage. "Very well. If you won't see reason, perhaps I need to ensure you see the truth." She turned to Elena. "Tell me, Miss Rosewood, has my brother told you about his condition? The full extent of it?" Elena frowned. "His blindness. His scars. Yes, we've discussed. Not his injuries. His episodes." Lady Caroline's smile was venomous. "Alexander, darling brother, have you told your beloved about the nightmares? The fits of rage? The times you wake screaming, convinced you're still in the burning building? The days you don't recognize where you are or who you're with?" Alexander's face had gone pale. "Caroline, stop. Why should I? She deserves to know what she's signing up for." Lady Caroline moved closer to Elena. "My brother suffers from what the doctors call soldier's heart. Terrible nightmares, violent outbursts, periods of confusion. Sometimes he doesn't sleep for days. Sometimes he locks himself in his room and won't see anyone for weeks. The servants are terrified of him during these episodes. Is this what you want to marry, Miss Rosewood? A man who might not even recognize you half the time? That's enough. Alexander's voice was sharp with anger and shame. But the damage was done. Elena looked at him and saw the truth in his face. This wasn't exaggeration. This was real. Why didn't you tell me? Elena asked quietly. Because I didn't want you to look at me the way you're looking at me now. With pity. With fear. Alexander's jaw clenched. The episodes are becoming less frequent. The doctors say in time. The doctors say lots of things, Lady Caroline interrupted. But the truth is, Alexander is damaged beyond his scars. He's broken, mentally as well as physically. And you, Miss Rosewood, are a foolish girl who thinks love can overcome everything. It can't. It will destroy you both. Elena felt the weight of the revelation pressing down on her. She thought of her mother, aging and frail, who would be caught in the social scandal. She thought of herself, tied to a man who might descend into madness, who might not even know who she was during his worst moments. And she thought of Alexander, standing rigid with shame, convinced she was about to flee like all the others. Lady Caroline, Elena said slowly, you're absolutely right about one thing, your brother is damaged. War damages people. Trauma damages people. But damaged doesn't mean broken beyond repair. It means surviving something that should have destroyed you. And I'm not so foolish as to think love overcomes everything, but I'm wise enough to know it's worth fighting for. She turned to Alexander, who stood frozen, waiting for her rejection. I need you to be honest with me, Elena said firmly. About the episodes, about your fears, about everything. No more secrets. Can you do that? Alexander's blind eyes glistened with unshed tears. They're getting better. Less frequent. Less severe. But yes, they still happen. And yes, I'm sometimes difficult to be around. And yes, it terrifies me that someday I might hurt you during an episode. Have you ever hurt anyone during an episode? No. Not physically. But I've said things, cruel things. Then we'll face it together. When the episodes come, I'll be there. We'll weather them, just as we'll weather the social scandal and your sister's disapproval and everything else. Elena took his face in her hands. I'm not leaving, Alexander. Not because of this. Not because of anything. You should, he whispered. You should run while you still can. I'm not very good at doing what I should. I'm an artist, remember? We're notoriously impractical. Alexander laughed, a choked, emotional sound, and pulled her into his arms. Behind them, Lady Caroline made a sound of disgust. You're both fools. This will end in disaster, and when it does, don't come crying to me. She swept from the room, leaving Alexander and Elena clinging to each other in the wreckage of her revelations. I'm sorry, Alexander murmured into Elena's hair. I should have told you. About the episodes, about everything. Yes, you should have. But I understand why you didn't. Elena pulled back to look at him. No more secrets though. Promise me. Whatever we face together, in full truth. I promise. No more secrets. They stood together while the storm raged outside, and Elena felt the full weight of what she'd taken on. This wouldn't be easy. There would be nightmares and social ostracism and Lady Caroline's ongoing hostility and countless other challenges. But when she looked at Alexander, when she felt his arms around her, she knew it would be worth it. Love was seeing someone in full truth, scars, trauma, complications, and all, and choosing them anyway. And that was exactly what she intended to do. The wedding took place 6 weeks later, in the small chapel on Blackthorn Manor's grounds. It was nothing like the grand society affair Alexander's first wedding had been, but it was perfect nonetheless. Elena wore a simple ivory gown with lace at the collar, not the elaborate confection a duchess should wear, but something that felt like her. Alexander wore deep blue, the color that brought out his eyes. And when the vicar asked if he took this woman to be his wife, his "I do" rang out clear and certain. The guest list was small. Elena's mother, moved to tears. Mrs. Thorne and the loyal staff of Blackthorn Manor. The 6 soldiers Alexander had saved, all of whom had made the journey to witness their commander's happiness. A handful of Alexander's more progressive friends who didn't care about social conventions. Lady Caroline did not attend. Neither did Alexander's mother, who'd sent a stiffly worded letter expressing her disappointment in his choices. Their loss, Elena thought, as she and Alexander exchanged vows in the candlelit chapel. When it came time for the kiss, Alexander cupped her face in his hands and whispered, "I still can't believe you're real." "Believe it," Elena whispered back. "I'm yours. Forever." The scandal, when it broke in London society, was every bit as vicious as Lady Caroline had promised. The gossip columns tore them apart. Cartoonists drew cruel caricatures. Invitations stopped coming. Not that Alexander and Elena had any interest in attending society functions anyway. But something unexpected happened. Their story resonated with people outside the aristocratic bubble. The soldiers who'd served under Alexander spread tales of his heroism. Elena's portraits began fetching higher prices, sought after by those who admired her courage in marrying for love rather than status. And slowly, grudgingly, some of the more progressive members of society began to view their marriage not as a scandal but as a romance. The episodes Alexander had feared continued, but less frequently than before. When they came, Elena was there, talking him through the nightmares, grounding him in reality, never flinching from the darkness. And gradually, with her steady presence, they diminished further. It was titled Seeing Together, and it perfectly captured their partnership. She provided the sight he'd lost, he provided the courage she sometimes doubted, and together they created something beautiful. The portrait was selected for exhibition at the Royal Academy, the first time in decades they'd accepted work from a female artist. It caused another scandal, but this one Elena revelled in. On the first anniversary of their wedding, Alexander and Elena stood in the south drawing room where she'd first painted him. The original portrait hung there now, in pride of place, a reminder of where they'd started. "Tell me what you see," Alexander asked, turning his face toward the painting he'd never seen. Elena looked at the portrait, at the Duke with his scars and blind eyes, his strength and vulnerability equally visible. Then she looked at the man standing beside her, who bore those same scars but wore them differently now. With acceptance. With pride. With the confidence of a man who knew he was loved. "I see you as you truly are," Elena said. "Brave. Worthy. Mine." "Ours," Alexander corrected, pulling her close. "We see together now, remember." And standing there in the light that Elena had insisted on from their very first session, Alexander Hartwell, Duke of Blackthorn, finally understood what she'd been trying to show him all along. That scars don't define you. Trauma doesn't define you. What defines you is how you survive, how you love, how you choose to live after the darkness. He'd survived. He'd found love. And he was, at last, truly living. The nursery at Blackthorn Manor was nothing like the rest of the house. Where the manor was gothic and severe, the nursery was bright with colour. Elena had painted murals on every wall, fantastical scenes of knights and dragons, forests and castles, all rendered in vibrant hues that caught the light. "Mamma, tell the story again," demanded a small voice. Elena smiled at her daughter, Charlotte, who at 4 years old already showed signs of inheriting both her father's stubbornness and her mother's artistic temperament. "Which story, darling?" "The story of how Papa became a hero and you saved him from the darkness." "That's not quite how it happened," Alexander said from the doorway, guided by the sound of his daughter's voice. He'd learned to navigate Blackthorn Manor so well that sometimes Elena forgot he was blind. Then tell it right, Papa, Charlotte demanded. Alexander settled into the rocking chair, and Charlotte climbed into his lap. Elena sat on the floor beside them, leaning against his legs, and listened as her husband told their daughter a story. Once upon a time, Alexander began, there was a duke who thought he was a monster. He hid in the darkness because he believed no one could bear to look at him. But then an artist came to his manor, and she did something extraordinary. What did she do? Charlotte asked, though she'd heard this story 100 times. She turned on all the lights. She refused to let him hide. And she looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a monster, but a man worth loving. And they got married and had me, Charlotte announced proudly. And had you, Alexander agreed, kissing the top of her head. The best thing that ever happened to either of us. After each other, Elena added. After each other, Alexander agreed. Later, after Charlotte had been tucked into bed, Alexander and Elena stood at the nursery window, looking out over the moor. The landscape that had once seemed so desolate to Elena now felt like home. Do you ever regret it? Alexander asked quietly. The scandal, the social isolation, tying yourself to a blind man with a troubled past. Elena turned to face him, taking his scarred face in her hands. Never. Not for one moment. Do you? How could I regret the best decision I ever made? They stood together in the dimming light, two people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built a life worth living. Elena thought about the Duke who'd summoned her to paint his portrait, thinking she'd capture a monster. Instead, she'd captured a man. And in the process, she'd captured his heart, and he'd captured hers. Some people would always see the scars. Some people would always judge their unconventional marriage. Some people would always question whether an artist and a duke could truly be happy together. But those people didn't matter. What mattered was this. Two souls who'd been lost in darkness had found each other. And together, they'd stepped into the light. As we leave Elena and Alexander in their hard-won happiness, I want you to consider what their story truly teaches us. This is not a story about Beauty and the Beast, though it borrows elements from that tale. This is a story about perception, about the difference between looking and seeing, between judging by appearances and understanding the truth beneath. Elena's gift wasn't just her artistic talent. It was her ability to see beyond the obvious, to find truth in what others dismissed as horror. She looked at Alexander's scars and saw sacrifice. She looked at his blindness and saw depth. She looked at his trauma and saw survival. But perhaps more importantly, Alexander learned to see himself differently. Through Elena's eyes, he discovered that his scars didn't make him a monster, they made him human. His trauma didn't make him broken, it made him a survivor. His blindness didn't limit him, it taught him to perceive truth in ways sighted people never could. In our world, we're surrounded by people who carry scars. Not always visible ones like Alexander's, but scars nonetheless. Trauma from past hurts. Damage from broken relationships. Wounds from battles others can't see. And too often, we judge these people by their scars rather than by their strength in surviving them. What if we chose to see differently? What if we looked past the surface damage to the person beneath? What if we had the courage Elena showed, to turn on all the lights and really look, to see people in their full truth rather than in comfortable shadows? And what about ourselves? How many of us are hiding in our own versions of Blackthorn Manor, convinced our scars make us unlovable, our damage makes us unworthy? How many of us need someone to turn on the lights and show us that we're not monsters, just human beings who've survived things that should have destroyed us? Elena and Alexander's story reminds us that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone whose imperfections you can accept, whose scars you can honor, whose darkness you're willing to sit in until you can both find your way to light. Their story asks us, are you brave enough to be seen in full truth? Are you brave enough to truly see another person, scars and all? Are you willing to believe that damaged doesn't mean unworthy, and scarred doesn't mean unlovable? Because if you are, if you can find that courage, you might discover what Elena and Alexander discovered. That the deepest connections happen not despite our scars, but because of them. That vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the foundation of genuine intimacy. That sometimes the person society tells us to reject is exactly the person we need most. The Duke who was called a monster found love with the artist who chose to see clearly. And in doing so, they both became more fully themselves, more honest, more brave, more alive. That's the gift of true seeing. That's the power of choosing love over fear, truth over comfortable deception, light over darkness. May we all find someone who sees us that clearly. And may we all have the courage to see others the same way.